Daj, da si tamo, budem bio srećan.
Da.
Вземете и работа, ще ми трябва. Сега имаш тон, така? Окей е тонът?
So I think, looking at the time and knowing that you have a busy schedule today, we will start right away. And whoever is pouring in, please have a seat. There are a few more seats here at the side. Welcome everybody. On behalf of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, I would like to welcome you to the Contemporary Museum of Modern Art here in Skopje. It's a beautiful setting, I think, and luckily it is not raining. This is an event that's co-hosted by Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, the German embassy. For Friedrich Ebert Stiftung here in Skopje. And it is my pleasure, of course, to welcome you, dear State Minister Michael Roth, here to Skopje again.
Your Excellency Gerberich, it's a great pleasure, it's a great honor to be here today. I've done many things in my past when I was young, and I'm still supporting the youth of Macedonia. I still support the progressive youth anywhere in the world. And I want to just thank the youth for teaching the Macedonian society a great lesson of from generations of politicians that didn't know how. Center for Freedom, a human rights organization from Macedonia. I thank you for coming here, for helping Macedonia and the Macedonian society and the government. And
I know it wasn't clear if you could come, and so we're happy to have you here. This event, and you also see some signs here. We have a hashtag for the event, which is hashtag #MKYouthEU, so please use it. We will have a Twitter wall prepared there. Say something, please raise your hand and let me know, and then we'll make sure to get the mic to you. Jabber already is something we want to, of course, support going forward as well, and that's why we organized this event. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Michael Roth and is in stock for Macedonia in the next year. And what do you think this will mean for the young generation in Macedonia, but also in the region, possibly?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for this marvelous view. And I'm sure this is the highlight of the day. Although I met the Prime Minister, I met the distinguished opposition leader of your country, but I count on you. I don't see a bright future of Macedonia without your engagement, without your... Oh my God, yeah. Sure. I don't see a bright future for your country without your engagement, without many friends across Europe. And I would like to be one of your closest friends because I love brave political leaders like your foreign minister. He is one of which touches the emotions of your people. And I don't want to underestimate it. But let me be very, very clear. Without I don't see any chance for you to join the European Union and NATO. That's the precondition. And that's not just my personal point of view. That is the joint position of the EU institutions, the Commission, the European Parliament, the Council of Ministers, and all 28 European member states. And I would love to see Macedonia in the near future on my side in the democracy here in the Western Balkans without a concrete, reliable and tangible EU perspective is more or less impossible. And that's why we have to keep our promises, and Macedonia has to keep its promise. But it's not just an obligation for the government. It's also an obligation for all political actors to take responsibility for the whole country. Politics is not a game. It is too serious. And please be honest. I know I met many well-educated, committed Europeans, young people. And I always raise two questions. The first one is, are you interested in politics? Definitely yes. That's a problem. And you have to regain trust and confidence. And I know how difficult it is because I'm involved in party politics for more than 31 years. This is a crucial part of my life. And that's why you are so important, because you will build up the future of your country. We need all of you. And that's why I would like to encourage you to stand up, to fight for your rights, to raise your voice, in order to make clear that this country believes in a bright future, in a united Europe and in NATO. And thank you very much again. And I'm just here to listen to you. I don't want to deliver a very long speech or a monologue. And I highly appreciate your contributions, your criticisms, and maybe your good ideas for the future of a united Europe. Thank you very much. And thanks again to Nicola, who is a really a true friend of mine, and you here today. Thank you very much.
I'd like to open up the floor already, so please let me know if you have questions, and directly start with you, Stefan. And actually, this is a very young politics, but also wanted to engage with the political party to do so as a mayor now. to make politics work on the local level, and what on the local level this shift towards European accession could mean for young people.
Dear Mr. Roth, dear Minister Dimitrov, distinguished guests, representatives of the media, it is my greatest pleasure to be here today with you. I used to be, and I'm still, the president of the Social Democratic Youth of Macedonia for almost 4.5 years. I used to be, back in 2014, the youngest member of the parliament. Learn different practices, new skills, new policies, how to make life better for the people. Unfortunately, until this moment, my municipality has a cooperation only with Fleury-sur-Orne, which is a very small municipality in France. So I expect a possibility for Macedonia and for my municipality to develop even deeper cooperation with different municipalities from the European Union, maybe from Germany, maybe from other member states, so we can make student exchanges. Karpoš. I also expect that the young people in Macedonia would have the chance to feel the benefits from youth guarantee. The youth guarantee is a normal practice in the EU, but it was first introduced here in Macedonia to job and to develop even further their skills, so they will be more competitive on the labor market in the future. And I also expect this to open up as a serious opportunity for young people who have bright ideas and want to start their personal business on a local level or on a country level with the help of the municipality or the state. So I expect that the country and the municipality get even more and just to briefly conclude, and at the end, if we speak about expectations from the EU, the list is too long, but just to conclude, the biggest thing that I expect to change in Macedonia is the behavior and the habits and the mentality of the Macedonian people. We must admit that this change should have started yesterday. It is not too late to start today. Really important to start developing a competitive spirit between the youth, to put an accent on their creativity and their competencies and not on their membership in a certain political release the youth from the barriers that arise from the nationalism that unfortunately in the past period was boosted on a very, very high levels for different political purposes on different political with Greece clearly opened the path of the youth and give hope to the youth that they need to stay here in their country, that they can find a job, develop a business here in their own country, they can form a family, a home here, and get old here in their own country, as it should be like everywhere.
Since you mentioned this last, I think it's a good way to move to Irena next. Since you mentioned the topic of having a future in the country and being able to work here as well. I'm going to quote the German ambassador on something that he used to say when before the agreement was made. He quoted, I think, his hairdresser that said, I can't feed my children with a name. Just to symbolize really, this is an important matter and we need a future for our country, and we all know that this is hard, but we may have to give up something. And I would like to add to that, we can't feed our children with every job, and that's a problem as well. And so I would like to give the floor to Irena as a youth representative. The developments and the hopes of your perspective, really, especially considering the topic of unemployment and hopefully, of course, future employment of young people.
Thank you, Eva. My name is Irena Ivanovska. I am coming from the Federation of Trade Unions of Macedonia, from the International Department. Also, I am a president of the youth section. So on behalf of the youth section of the Federation of Trade Unions of Macedonia, I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate on the panel discussion dedicated to the EU perspectives of the Macedonian youth, and at the same time to present the views of the young trade union members who are already part of the big European family through the membership of our organization into the European organizations such as the ETUC and the ITUC. What I would like to emphasize from a trade union aspect in terms of how the EU membership shall contribute to improving the opportunities of young people in the country in terms of education and employment is the following. Bearing in mind the complex economic and political position and the issues that our country is facing with, which tend to be improving in the past period, we are aware that young people in our society do not have adequate conditions for self-development that their European peers have. We are aware that people in Macedonia are faced with a huge number of issues, starting first in the education process, given the fact that we have a huge number of people who do not have access to education. Then young people are facing with issues referring to the transition from the education to the labor market, taking into account that almost half or 44.3% of the unemployed are young people, and also 56.7% of the unemployed fall into the category of long-term unemployed. And then finally, young people have issues when they enter into the labor market. They have salaries that are lower than the salaries of the other employees. Probably they will be offered employment contracts for a definite period of time, and most of them will have first employment not suitable to their education and qualification. With the integration process, young people hope that they shall have a faster and greater access to the European educational systems, which will enable young people to be educated on a higher level, thus realistically opening the possibilities for self-development and employment in their own country. Also, they hope for greater opportunity for internship and practice in some of the European companies, which will gain skills and working experience that will ease the process from transition from education to work. And especially important aspect for the unions is the possibility of foreign investments that will create decent jobs with decent salaries to young people, who will be recognized eventually as highly professionals who provide highly qualified support for personal and social development. And at last, of course, we hope for easier networking with youth organizations from the European countries in order to exchange experience, opinions, and views on issues that are of interest to young people. The trade union, as an active social partner in the country and the creator of the socioeconomic policies and the only organized economic power of the workers, remains on its efforts for a faster EU integration process and shall continue to work its activities supporting these processes, and of course shall continue its fight for protection of worker rights with a special emphasis on young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Irina. I would like to ask the foreign minister now to comment a little bit on these first impressions of young people, and we would, I think, all be curious to hear your thoughts, and especially what you think will really provide a perspective for young people here in the country, of course, with the new agreement and with the really signals that came from the EU summit and the NATO summit we had.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung and for organizing this, and of course the German embassy. Thank you for your kind words. I bribed him with a T-shirt last night, so I think it worked. I said, praise me please tomorrow. I don't really have talking points. Yes, yeah. So, I think what we do is essentially for the young people. When Macedonia became independent, I was 18, 19. I got my job at the Foreign Ministry at the age of 23, graduating at the Faculty of Law, not too far from here. No one then really asked me for a party membership card. There was a big competition. I got the job. And then I grew up in the context of my diplomatic practice. We lost maybe one whole generation in the waiting room. Dignity is important. Self-confidence is important. And I think when we talk about patriotism, patriotism must be related. I don't think we should shy away from this term. You cannot give patriotism to shallow nationalists or selfish nationalists. Patriotism is a dedication of a lifetime. It has to be about courage. So you have to have the courage to face the will of the people. The best way to do this is through a referendum. You have to have courage to face what Michael was talking about, to assume your responsibility. For any foreign minister of Macedonia, the easiest thing to do was to shelve the difficult dispute we had with Greece in a drawer and leave it there. And you can, I can hit my lungs here, and I can say big words against the neighbors. I can complain about how the world is so unfair and there is no justice, but you have to face reality, face problems, have the self-confidence and the courage to resolve them to the best of your ability. I think for this country, we don't live in an island. We live in a region that still faces issues and uncertainties. It's really important for the future of our country, of Macedonia, to join NATO so that we don't ask what kind of borders we will have in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It is really important to catch this train because Europe is busy. Europe is itself in a soul-searching process. All these crises with Brexit, the financial, the Eurozone, migration, the whole landscape, the political landscape of Europe is challenged with the migration crisis. So we don't really have time to waste. We don't know if there will be another train, so we have to catch this one. I don't think there will be all roses, even after catching the train. There will be sweat, there will be tears, but the best chance for our country to become a European democracy with good education, with politicians that will be accountable, with media that will be free, with judges that will be independent, is to catch that train. We will have to change our country, but we're going to do this easier in the context of the EU accession, which is essentially a reform tool. For me, and I am almost 46, this is the last chance to start to our next one. And my daughter is here in the audience. She is turning 19 soon. And we're going to do this. We're going to do this because it's bigger than the politics of today. And I'm going to end again with responsibility and patriotism. It must mean even, at times, a political self-sacrifice. After all, why are we doing this, if not for achieving something big? So I think we have a chance. It will take a number to make it embarrassing for any member state of the 28 not to be supportive of the start of the accession talks for Macedonia. And we're going to do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Dimitrov. This was very hopeful message, I think, towards young people. And I would like to continue with Blaž and ask you maybe to come in front so that the camera people big trouble, and to respond specifically also to this remark and the question on how do we actually change behavior and how do we get people engaged. You, as a representative from the National Youth Council, I think have a very good feel what young people in the country are interested in, what they're looking for, and what they need in order to be engaged.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's a real joy to be among you. I don't know if the minister remembers, but 2-3 years ago we had a debate in the law faculty in Skopje, and that's the first time we met. Yeah. Who would have thought that after 2-3 years we would be here talking about the EU accession? Definitely not me, as a skeptic. But the thing that after 3 years we're here talking about the EU accession. What we have to keep in mind when we talk about the EU accession is that we cannot promise too much. The EU accession will not resolve all of the problems of youth in Macedonia, and we have to keep our homework tight and really do the job what we want to achieve. So keeping this in mind, I think first of all what the EU accession will definitely offer to us, and it's good that we have the representative of the EU accession talks leader, Bojan, to listen to this, because the EU accession and the screening process will definitely open up the possibilities for young people to say what really is happening with the implementation of laws, what needs to be changed, and I really hope that the EU accession and the screening process will open up the groups cross-sectorial for all young people to participate, not all, but representatives of young people to participate in the working groups and to really have their perspective on the different problems that they're facing on a daily level. The second thing is that this probably will also set up what I call up until now baby steps in a real structured dialogue between young people and government representatives. not only working groups, but real sitting down together between representatives of young people and saying what the problems are, not only regarding the EU accession, but in the daily life of young people. And this is an opportunity I think we as young people have to take, and listen to and use in the right manner for the resolvement of our problems. When it comes to political participation of young people, we really have to bring back the trust of young people. So this means also demystification of public policy, and this is, when I say this, I mean when we have discussions, not to go into that the media or that the people are the judges of our system. No, the young people are here to present their problems, work on their problems, and really use this information to create better policies on the long run. And I think this is something we have to be very quick, because the referendum will be quite quickly, probably in September or October, and we really need to push young people and to give them the belief that changes are really possible, open, and that the change will not happen by night, and it will not happen if young people stay at home. They really have to go out and fight for their rights and for their problems. And I think this is something that we have to work on in the few months that we have up until the referendum, to really bring back the positive side of policy and not to talk.
Blažen, and youth organization officially to do so soon, so please get in touch with people that you meet here if you're not already in touch with them. I think this would actually be an interesting opportunity to, Albert, if you don't mind, say something about the role of RICO in this whole context. Being involved with RICO here, I know I'm kind of picking you out now, but I think this is a really important point for the entire region, and it has the potential to actually bring about change for young people and address young people's issues in the entire region. So I would be curious to hear what you think, especially of the remarks of the two ministers, but really also as somebody who's very involved in the RICO process.
Thank you very much, Eva. I don't know if I should stay there or maybe
Whichever
from here.
Come here.
Because this is just spontaneous. So. Yeah, I mean, RICO is just a new opportunity for the youth, not just in Macedonia, but in the region of Western Balkans. I'm lucky to be representing RICO in Macedonia, heading the office of RICO. And for more, I'm really lucky to have continuous support by the government on not just the youth issues, but support of operational support of RICO. Of course, there is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany and the others, but without them we will be nothing. In regards to the issues that are raised here from the youth, I simply can conclude from the beginning that youth here are becoming braver. We've had a lot of challenges, we had a lot of issues that helped youth to emancipate in sense of becoming more resilient towards the political streams that are promoting nationalism, and not just that are promoting nationalism, but they live based on fake nationalism, and they feed the young brains with stereotypes and prejudices. I'm really happy to see movements here in the region, in Macedonia especially, that helps not just the politicians, but helps fighting against these political streams that are taking us back. It's, for me, I always say patriotism, or the one that loves Macedonia, should also be aware that Macedonia should be freed from stereotypes, from prejudices, and for more, it should be freed from fear from each other. And this can come true only if they are connected, first internally, national level in Macedonia, secondly, if they are connected in regional level. In regional level, there are a lot of experiences by youth that have also suffered, maybe even more, facing different conflict, violent conflicts. We should and we must learn from the past. We have proven in the past that we could cooperate together, and RICO is just now opening doors for youth to be linked in the region by providing them opportunities to move, but also helping helping youth to open new dimensions of reconciliation, new understanding of reconciliation in the youth. Unfortunately, we mentioned the previous generations here, but the previous generations also deteriorated the situation and created a lot of obstacles for the youth. And now they face with issues of employment, with issues of mobility, with many issues that a young person in Germany doesn't have. So I'm really here not just wishing them to overcome these issues, but full-heartedly, as part of RICO, will help this youth to overcome the issues. And thank you for inviting me here. Civil, Friedrich Ebert, the embassy is also supporting us a lot, and I see that you have a lot of support here. We stay committed as institution. We are intergovernmental institution. We are also limited, but we stay committed to the energy of youth, and we will support with all our means. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Albert, and for being so spontaneous about this as well. And again, I want to really invite anybody who's interested in saying something. It can be a question, it can be a comment. Just raise your hand, and I will sure to get the microphone to you. But as long as that's not the case, I would like to ask Ognen for a brief comment, because one thing Albert also mentioned was actually in a way, the different ethnic groups that are all living here in Macedonia, but it's not just ethnic, all kinds of minorities, you know, living in Macedonia. And I think one of the most important tests for functioning democracy is how well do they treat minorities, and that's sort of the baseline. And if that's not a given, then we have a problem. And I would like to ask you to elaborate a little bit on your perspective as to what the prospect of starting EU accession talks could mean for minority issues in this country, and how far along the way we are in regard to an inclusive society, and of course specifically really also what needs to happen in the near future. What kind of reforms, what kind of change of attitude do you think we need to see in the Macedonian public? Yeah, please, your word.
Thank you, Mr. Roth, Minister Dimitrov. Thank you for this event, especially because there is a lot to share from many perspectives when it comes to the accession in these quite challenging times, I must say. When it comes to the minorities, the discrimination, just as a I work as a journalist, but also a human rights activist and a member of several managing boards of NGOs, international and domestic. In the past 2 years, I've been working on a project when it comes to the inclusion and the inter-ethnic communication in Macedonia, especially when it comes to the education. And we've came to a conclusion that as of 2001, as of the Ohrid Framework Agreement, all those projects and everything that was done in the past of integration of minorities in the Macedonian society, it resulted in many ways of segregation, bigger segregation, as we have parallel communities that live with each other, but they do not know each other. They don't know their cultures, their traditions, their religions, and they do not talk among each other, which is a quite difficult problem, especially because of all the projects that I've been working on when it comes to, I think that we should change the battery. Yeah. Because of the live stream I need, but... yeah, so... Thank you. Does this work? Okay.
It's a remarkable voice.
Because of the live stream, I have to speak on my phone. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so I will be louder. The thing is that yeah. Okay. Thank you. Nema vrske, evo gotovo proravod. The thing is that of all those projects, we live in a society where youth from Macedonian, Albanian, Turkish, blacks, ethnicity, Serbian or whatever, they do not talk with each other. And this is a problem that we must tackle if we want to integrate as a country inside the EU. On the other side, we have some steps that we have done in this past year when it comes to the marginalized communities, when it comes to the LGBT rights with the interparliamentary group that works on these questions, which is a very good thing, but at the same time, I think that the biggest problem when it comes to youth and when it comes to discrimination and EU is the apathy that the young people feel in this country. They are not even interested not only in party politics, but they are not interested even in politics itself, because they think that politics here in Macedonia is only connected with political parties. They do not see that politics is everything that we live every day, everything that we fight for clean air, for every human right or citizen's right. And at the same time, when they do want to protest about something that is discriminating them, if they even do recognize that, the problem with that part is that they are afraid that they will be branded as being part of somebody's movement, which movement is part of some political party. And that brings them into apathy, which is really, really scary for this country, especially because with 85% of all the young people that I've been working with on projects, and I'm talking on, I just want to leave the country. Where do you see yourself in the future? Well, I see myself after finishing high school going to study abroad. They do not even wait to study here in this country. They want to study abroad. And this is something that we should work on. This is something that we should put a perspective on. And we should teach the youth how to recognize politics and how to recognize when they're discriminated, because of all the discrimination they have, because this country works a lot with the elderly people, but they do not work with the youth, because you can't even catch a bus in the morning, a public transport, because the elderlies are going to the bazaars, because everything that has been done in the past years has been done in the way to the elderly people and not to the youth. And they feel that they're discriminated in this society, and that the society and the government, and the governmental bodies and institutions do not work for them, but they work only for the safe votes for elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ognen. I would like to give an opportunity to the two ministers to respond to some of the questions, starting with Michael Roth now, and also bring into this online community question, since I mentioned we have this Twitter hashtag some people also sent in some questions there, and this was in regard to the, just asking for your comment on this figure that more than 2/3 of youth want to leave the country or do not see a future here. So what are your thoughts on that? And of course, really a broader question in regard to all the comments we heard.
Thank you very much for the statements and the questions, and I would like to emphasize some issues you already raised, and I would like to start with our joint commitment. That's why we are so committed in a European future for Macedonia, because brain drain is a tragedy for you. It's good for us, because young, well-educated people are very much welcome on the German labor market. But it won't solve any problem here in your country. And stability, a clear pro-European commitment, a functioning rule of law, a modern public administration, independence of judiciary is not just a nice to have. This is the precondition for private investment, especially from smaller and medium-sized enterprises. And I was very, very happy to know, which I received from your Prime Minister, that after the agreement with Greece, 10 European companies will invest a lot of money here in Macedonia to create jobs. And that's what you really need. And believe it or not, but the European Union is first and foremost a union of common values. And these values bind everybody. And the European Union is much more than just a single market or a monetary union or just an economic project. And I know that it's extremely difficult to fulfill all the conditions. And young people are extremely impatient. They don't want to wait too long, like me. But the more engaged you continue on the reform path towards the EU, the easier and the faster it is to join the EU in the near future. And that brings me to another issue. The European concept of societies is value-based. These values bind everybody. But we are open to different religions, different cultures, and different ethnicities. And we can't offer any political discount on the treatment of minorities. And Roma people and LGBTI people are the most vulnerable minorities in all European countries, And I know how difficult it is to improve the environment for such minorities. It takes decades. And it was also a huge challenge for my country to establish a climate of respect, acceptance, and tolerance to religious, sexual, cultural, and ethnic minorities. It's a long and bumpy road, but it's worth it. And for many, many people here in your country, it sounds a little bit strange if they receive invitations to pride marches or other events. But it highlights that the European Union believes in diversity. And diversity enriches a country. Sometimes it's very much exhausting, but it enriches societies. And we can learn from each other. Just to share one positive example with you. My impression is that in the Western Balkans, you establish a peaceful cooperation between the religions. We can learn from each other. Peaceful cooperation between religious groups, churches in my country, in many, many EU member states, is extremely difficult. For instance, your country, or also Albania, highlights that European Islam is possible. It works. It's not a problem to be a Muslim, to be a Christian, to be a Protestant, to be a Jew, to live in Europe. We are open and we respect all these minorities. But, and that's sometimes hard to understand, it takes time. Respect and tolerance is for many, many people extremely demanding, because they, and that brings me to the name issue. The propaganda in your country is that Macedonia will lose its national identity, it will lose its national sovereignty, it will lose its culture, its history. That's absolutely nonsense. Nobody wants to delete your cultural identity. But we expect that you live together with your neighbors, with your friends, and with the citizens in peace and respect and in tolerance. And that makes RICO so valuable. I'm very much concerned about the rise of nationalism and populism in the younger generation. And the climate of nationalism intoxicated a whole society. This is also an experience we made in Germany. We are all in one boat. We share the same challenges. We share the same experiences. And that's why we have to stand united. And I'm not just the Minister for Europe, I'm also the Secretary General for Franco-German relations in my government. And the Franco-German Youth Office was the role model for RICO. And I hope that there is a chance to be more supportive. I was so happy to see, happy to hear when I visited RICO on Sunday in Tirana, that RICO received 400 applications. But the capacities are very much limited. That's why RICO can just support 34 projects. But it's a good starting point, and it's an invitation to young people. Mobility is crucial. Connectivity is crucial. The whole Western Balkans are overshadowed by stereotypes, threats and cliches. But if you talk with each other and not just about each other, you can overcome stereotypes and cliches. That's a huge challenge for all of us. And that's why I believe in mobility and in connectivity of the people. And I can't agree more, Lars, I totally agree. The European Union should not promise too much. And what really counts is ownership. We made in the accession talks many, many mistakes. For many, many people, many, many representatives of civil societies, the negotiations with the European Union were more or less a project of technocrats, diplomats and civil servants from Brussels and from the national capital. They gathered together, they tried to solve the problems, but it was more a technical procedure. No, not at all. It is much more a political procedure. And please accept the invitation of the government. I bother my friends at the government because I always express a clear expectation. Please invite civil society to become a crucial part of this extremely demanding project, because it takes time. The accession, the way towards the European Union is a long and bumpy road, but it's worth it. And I would like to defend a little bit party politics. Yeah, I know many people are fed up by political parties. And it's extremely important to be involved in grassroots movements, in NGOs. And for instance, LGBTI rights are human rights. Roma rights are human rights. But in all vivid democracies across the world, you need political parties who take responsibility for the whole country. And if you want to change them, the parties, beat them, join them, take responsibility. It's also, it's not the problem just here for the political parties in Macedonia, it's also a challenge for my party, in my country. In the public polls, our results are horrific. The results are between 15 and 20% for a governing party. It's a catastrophe. And Social Democrats and progressives are totally under pressure across Europe because we haven't established a forward-looking strategy against nationalism and against populism. That is one of our major challenges in the next time. And I'm sure we have to exchange our views. And I highly appreciate conservative parties. I highly appreciate center-left or center-right parties. I highly appreciate green parties and liberal parties. They are all extremely crucial for a fair competition between democratic parties. But please, tolerate them, talk to them, express your expectations. It's extremely important. My last point I would like to highlight is the fight against corruption and organized crime. This is a serious problem for the Western Balkans because your countries and your societies have to face many stereotypes and cliches. And that's why my expectation to political leaders is please clean your countries from corruption. It's a poison for the whole society. And express your expectations. This is also an expectation to political parties, but at the end, and I can't agree more, remain optimists. It's worth it. At the end, the people will receive a lot. And again, if you want to create jobs, if you want to strengthen rule of law, if you want to strengthen the human rights, if you want to strengthen the fight against corruption and organized crime, there's just one attractive offer, and this is the EU perspective. But ownership is extremely crucial. It's in your hands. It's not my job to convince you. It's your job to take responsibility for the future of your country. It was a bit too long, I'm sorry.
That's okay, it was many points. I would like to pick up on a few things that you actually pitched there and would like to address first Bojan Maricic and use the opportunity that you're here. And I would like to ask you also a question that actually came from the online community, so maybe you can just join us here in front for a brief comment. First of all, we'd be of course curious to hear, I mean, you already mentioned, and what was mentioned was also the role of ownership, really, of Macedonia in these accession talks. So I would like for you to elaborate a little bit on that, and then also address another question, maybe first this.
Okay. Thank you, Eva. I really haven't been participating in such a good quality panel for a long time, so thank you for that. I come from the civil society, and sometimes I forget or I forgot the bliss of these discussions. So I really enjoy this. It's very ungrateful to speak among the last speakers here because already all the great ideas were told by the previous speakers, but I'll try to give a personal view on this and also to answer all the questions that were raised regarding the EU negotiations. Back in 2008, I worked for a couple of years on a project in the Ministry of Interior on legislation approximation of the EU legislation to our system, specific because that was the the time when this acquis regarding the chapters 24, transport, etc. were open for the Ministry of Interior. So actually the team that I worked in on this project worked on the first correspondent tables for the government, etc. Quite technical and technocratic, but very substantial work at that time. So there was a great enthusiasm at the beginning when we started, and in 2008, after the Bucharest summit, it was huge disappointment for everyone. It was major disappointment for the institutions, but I think even greater at the level of citizens. And that was very much used, those emotions of disappointment were used and abused by the political elite at that time to push the country in a different direction. After that disappointment in April 2008, I left the country and went to the Netherlands for master studies in European law, and then another master studies for European integration in London. Not a good place to study European integration, I have to say. No, I'm just kidding. It was a great experience and very valuable experience, but I was absent from the country a couple of years in a row. And I came back in 2011, in the summer of 2011, on the very day when the monument of Alexander the Great was erected on the square. It was horrible for me. I couldn't recognize my country and my city after a couple of years of being abroad. And at that moment, I realized that we're going in the wrong direction already. And there was a dilemma within me, as it was in many people, young people at that time. Should I stay or should I go? But I decided to stay, and I decided to fight. And that wasn't fight for a specific political cause, but it was fight for European Macedonia. It was fight for Macedonia that will be based on rule of law, on friendship, and on progress and progressive ideas. And this fight still goes on. I believe that I work still on this fight. Many of my friends and my colleagues left the country for good, and they are now working as consultants in Brussels, Belgrade, Tirana, or across Europe. And one of the main tasks of the government, and me personally working on this operative level of EU negotiations, will be to bring back some of those young professionals who are, some of them are still young, and who can contribute a lot, and that can bring their personal cause, professional cause of bringing Macedonia into the European Union and also transforming Macedonia in a modern European country, to bring them back here and to make this fight their own fight, because many of them are enthusiastic still about their country. So this is also an open call for all the people that were born in 70s, 80s and 90s to come along, and join this fight and take ownership on the fight, because this will be also a long journey, which will be a generational task for everyone, for every one of us, but will be also a national task at national level. Which brings me to the second point I wanted to make, and it is related to the referendum. A couple of weeks ago we were in London at the Berlin Process Summit together with Minister Dimitrov, and it was a lovely experience. But among these discussions there, I have realized that 80% of the young people were in favor of stay option at the British referendum. Only 20% were for leave. And with the older generation, it was quite the opposite. 80% were for leave and 20% for remain. And this generational gap makes deep cleavage in the British society. This is what myself, I really like Britain. I lived there for a year, and I can see that cleavage still present in the society. I think this is the most important task of young people in Macedonia for this referendum. We should not leave this cleavage to stay and to be present here, which means that the young people should not only go out and vote on this referendum, but they must convince their parents and grandparents that this is important for them, that this is vote for the young people. So you should address your parents and grandparents, telling them you go out and vote for me, for my future, and for a brighter and more secure future of us, the younger generations and the country. And I cannot imagine more important question for this generation now, people who are young or mid-age now. There will be no more important question than this one that will be decided this fall. So this is really important, urgent. It is not easy, but it's certainly necessary. And the third thing that I want to say, and then last one, then I'll give you the chance to ask me the second question. I think that the people, so-called ordinary people that are outside politics, daily politics or party politics, understand the things very well. The cab driver, the taxi driver who brought me here, he told me, I know who you are and I would like you to pass 2 messages to Zaev. He said, number 1, don't you think to give amnesty for the special prosecutors cases? And number 2, you should today immediately offer help to Greece for what happened yesterday with the fires. So he didn't hear, I suppose, but this is very big and major message from ordinary people, because it wasn't like that a few years ago. Many people were hiding publicly that they're going to Greece at all, that they're visiting Greece. So this message by an ordinary citizen, a hard-working taxi driver, is a big message, which means that people know and feel what is right and what is wrong. And I believe that if they're given the right chance to decide this fall, they are going to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bojan. Actually, you already addressed the question that I wanted to ask you, so thank you very much for commenting on this and for coming spontaneously to this. Thanks. But I would like to ask Anna to comment on another thing, actually, because you brought about a conversation with a taxi driver, and I also had a conversation with a taxi driver. He didn't ask me to address something to the Prime Minister because he knew I couldn't do that. But we talked about this country, and I mentioned that I love the weather, that it's a beautiful country, and he knew I was from Germany. He noticed immediately, and he said, well, yeah, the weather is nice here, but you have rule of law, that's more important. And it made me basically shut up for the rest of the drive. But I would like for you, Anna, to elaborate a little bit on this topic that was also brought to the table now by Bojan, and on the topic of corruption, and specifically really on what you think needs to happen in order for the accession talks to move successfully, or well, for us to reach accession talks, and then what you think in regard to these topics of rule of law and corruption you want to see happen in the next year, let's say.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here, distinguished guests, and I'm especially happy because my students are here, so I see them developing very well, so for me this is very important. In reference to the question of the corruption, or in general, in reference to the question of relations between Macedonia and the European Union, I would like to stress that I like the general developments, although my opinion is not a popular one in the sense of not having the strict in situ date for the negotiations. So for me, this is good news. This is not a bad news. Why? Because I think that together with the screening process, this will bring gravitational pressure to the Macedonian society to respond on the urgent priority reforms. And in this sense, not having this strict date, it is a good thing for us, because we will have to do our job as soon as it's possible. Four main targets are here, right? The reform of the public administration, then judicial reform, corruption, which is, and also the reform of the intelligence services. So, of course, this is related with the referendum and everything else, but the most important thing is to cut this culture of submissiveness towards the authoritarian tendencies which are inherent to any government, although and especially those that are connected to the transitional democracies, let's say. Also, I would like to stress that, of course, that corruption has devastating repercussions to the overall society. But from the other side, yesterday we saw some interesting developments in a special, not in special prosecutor office, but the regular one. The prosecutor office, as I understood, they already run some investigation about the fund of innovations, which when scandal leaked 2 days ago. So this dynamic is indicative, although it is not sufficient. Nevertheless, at the end, I'm very optimistic on the future developments in the regard of our capacity to respond on the priority reforms. Why? First of all, because we already showed that we have that capacity, even in two very interesting occasions that were tackling even security questions. And in these processes of democratization and overcoming the crisis, the youth had a very important role. So I would suggest them to stay proactive. Also, I would like to encourage them to raise the questions that are not only referring to their personal agendas, having in mind their youth, but also tackling other questions like, for example, corruption in the education, let's say, and so on. And of course, you asked what are the opportunities for young people to being part of Europe. I mean, this is so evident. There are many programs and in some, for example, strategies for youth development, a lot of funds. Well, let's say there is this European Commission's youth employment initiatives with a budget of 9 million, approximately 9 billion for a period of 2000 to 2014. Then there is this Creative Europe program. They have to consult all of them. Social funds frameworks for inclusion and employment and so on. I'm not going to stress all of them. What I'm suggesting to the youth, there is a very interesting portal, especially talking about diversity. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. Then, if they want to be engaged more in the sense of active citizenship within the European Union, I strongly suggest to consult this website, the European Youth Portal, which is very important to the youth targeting their problems. So that is being last. I try to be as short as I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And the European Youth Portal, make sure to check out that website. Apparently, that's very helpful. I wanted, before we close this event, I can have the opportunity to invite you for a small lunch around the corner on the other side of the terrace. I would like to address this topic of corruption in education and in general the education sector that was named, and give you, Dimitar, the opportunity to address this topic really.
Thank you, Eva. So distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for the invitation on behalf of the Youth Educational Forum. I will address some of the main challenges that our educational system has as a whole, and some of the points that maybe weren't previously mentioned in the speeches before me. Considering the high level of corruption, it is present in all levels of our education, especially in the higher one. So maybe I would like to refer to that of Mr. Bogoev to change the mentality, first of all, of the students. So whenever there is a case of corruption, to encourage them to report it and to stand aside with the professors as well in the fight against corruption. I would like to stress out the legal framework on the law on the corruption and for the protection of the whistleblowers. That is a huge step forward in the accordance with the European legal framework. And of course, there are the three main legal acts: the law on primary education, secondary, and higher education. Maybe I will address the Comprehensive Education Strategy 2018 and 2025 as well, which was adopted this year. And I'm personally very curious to see how it will be addressed and implemented in the following years. And maybe through the scope and of work and our line of work from Youth Educational Forum, one of the major reforms that we would like to see is the student representation and participation. So if we would like to have active citizens who will take part in different roles of the society in different layers, maybe we should start from primary education and further develop these European values and democratic principles in the secondary education as well, so that in the future these citizens could take part in all of the different important processes. Maybe when we discuss the discrimination, research that YEF did showed that there is unfortunately a huge discrimination towards the people with different personal disabilities and different members of marginalized groups in our society. On one hand, they cannot enter physically into these education institutions. On the other hand, they do not have reading materials, audio lessons, or written materials in the Braille alphabet that is available to them. So at this point, I would like to stress out the European initiative to support the use of digital technology and digital tools for teaching and learning. On the one hand, it could help the teachers and professors who do not possess the skills to deal with these students. And on the other hand, it could ease up the whole learning process of these students, not only in the higher education, but in all three tiers as well. Maybe with the accession in the EU, all of this process and the student mobility will become much easier, and the whole administrative and paperwork will become more or less so. With gaining this international experience and academic excellence, maybe we can bring those students here in Macedonia and transfer it to different layers of our society, so that they are going to be willing to stay here and contribute to our society, and not, which leads directly to the loss of young and qualified workforce, which leads to population age, but aging of the population. But in my last remarks, I think that with the accession to the EU, our whole educational system will advance a lot, and it will reach its potential, and maybe its final goal is to create citizens with who can think critically and who can practically use what they've learned in the different levels of education, so that they could participate freely and defend their rights whenever it comes to their breach. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitra. So this panel is close to ending, but I would like to give the floor once more, first of all, to the foreign minister to respond to this. You've been listening really patiently and to all of these comments from young people in your country, and I would just be curious in a brief comment on this before we close and invite you all around the corner for lunch. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. 3 brief points. My favorite self-motivating motto in these last several years has been "Can I be there?", which is sort of loosely translated, people make it. And the first time I thought of it was watching the students when they organized themselves and made a difference. And that was the initial catalyst that made this new phase of the more mature Macedonia possible. So I want to say thank you to the students. It started with young. This whole possibility we have is because of them. And this, also for me as a citizen of this country, is also, you know, a reassurance. I think we will make it. Second, the brain drain. All things, yes, we can. Change is possible. All things considered, it is easier to find Europe in Germany or in the Netherlands. But it's much more fulfilling to make Macedonia European. And what kind of a generation we will be if we don't do our best to make that happen. And last point, a few days ago we marked the birthday of Nelson Mandela. And one of my favorite quotes of his is, "It always seems impossible until it's done. And no one else will do this but us. And we're going to make this happen." These months, these next few years, this is our chance of our generation. And it's so much, because I've been there, I've studied in the UK, I worked for a think tank in the Netherlands. I relatively well established myself in that world of think tanks and NGOs. You can never have an impact as big as the impact you can have in your own country. And our country are we. And in terms of corruption, this is my fourth, not well thought through. We saw with the students, we saw with the colorful revolution, people can make a difference. We still do mistakes, maybe too many. We correct most of them. And we correct most of them because people speak, they make a stand, they push, everything is in our hands. And we should not shy away. I'm going to end with this referendum. To me, we grew up in this fear of constant challenges on our identity, on the church, on the language, on whether we are Macedonians or not, on being afraid of our neighbors, of being afraid from Brussels. Someone else in an office is thinking about our future, ordering all, you know. This effort in 1 year and a month, essentially trying to accomplish things that we haven't done in the last 15 years before that, is an effort where we try to control our own destiny. And when we close the Macedonian question, art of the possible, under the real limits and constraints, but on our terms. And nothing good can come if you hide in the trenches of history. You have to get out, you have to face it, you have to move forward, and nothing good can come if you start a kicking exercise with your neighbors, be it Bulgaria or Greece. And the reason why in London the summit was mentioned, Macedonia was mostly talked about as a beacon of hope. I got a question, how do you feel with the burden of being the only country that represents a hope for a real democracy in the Balkans? This is a question I got from someone who was, I don't know, maybe Serbia, maybe another country. We did this, and it started with the students, with the young. So let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think this is the perfect final word for this discussion, really. I mean, I would like to Okay, mission accomplished. Thank you very much for Minister Dimitrov for coming. Thank you in particular State Minister Roth for making the effort of stopping by here. It's really important to see you here as a German representative. My special thank, of course, to the cooperation partner here, Civil and the German Embassy, of course. Thank you for cooperating with us, Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, in this event, and to all the young people who came here, who articulated their points, who made a point in really showing up and committing to these important issues at this particular time that is so crucial for the country. So it is my pleasure to have you stick around a little bit for a little reception reorganized around the corner with a beautiful view over the city. The sun has come out, the muezzin has stopped singing, so I think it's time for us to go to lunch. So thank you very much.